Former Texas Secretary of State and former interim Texas Attorney General John Scott, thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate it.
Jack, it's a pleasure to be with you.
I wanted to start by asking about your time as interim Attorney General. I think a lot of people were surprised when the governor announced you would be leaving the post after such a short stay. So talk to us about the timing of it all.
Well, they probably weren't a part of the original conversations that I had with the governor that I would be willing to do it for a very short period of time. And really with the thought that this would be something, and I think the founders probably envisioned that it would be something, the impeachment process would be handled fairly quickly. And so that something in a 30-day time frame, if it went a little longer, that's okay. But then it became very clear that it was going to be way past 30 days. And so that was when we went back to the original representations or understanding that I would be there in a very short period of time and go back to my private practice. And so that ended up extending to 6 weeks, which is much better than going the full time through September, which this thing will end up being at a minimum.
And when you got the call from the governor, why did he come? Why did he pick you?
You'd have to talk to him. I've known him a long time and worked for him in a variety of roles, and have always tried to do kind of what I thought was in the best interest of the state, which is what our governor wants people that work for him to do.
And what was the mission? What did he want you to do as interim attorney general? And what was your takeaway and what your role really was going to be?
Yeah, he didn't put any barriers on what I was supposed to do over there. The goal, though, was to go over and hopefully bring a sense of calm to the folks there at the Attorney General's office, many of whom I worked with when I was there with the governor when he was Attorney General, to really calm nerves, get people back on mission, which is defending the state, defending the laws of the state, and hopefully stem the tide on people that were thinking they needed to leave or move on to another position that seemed like it may have a little more surety in the future than what the current situation was at the time.
Well, how nervous were people? I mean, were people leaving?
Well, they had lost a number of people had gone over to work on for General Paxton, about 6 really high ranking people who had done an enormous amount of work product. There were stories that there were another 9 that were fixing to leave as well to maybe do the same thing. There were people who had given pause and said we were reconsidering coming to work at the AG's office. So there were a lot of losses, and I was really worried about maybe a death spiral situation where you had a lot of people exiting the place, but you also at the same time had the inability to hire people back and reload the system full of qualified folks. And that's what I would envision being a death spiral for the agency. And we were able to calm it, and it's back. I guess to use the metaphor of a plane, it's trimmed out and it's back running a regular process right now.
And so were you able to convince, everyone who was thinking or, thinking about leaving or thinking about, not coming after saying they would to the office? I mean, did you change everybody's minds?
I don't know if we get 100%, but I think the vast majority of the people felt a little sense of surety. I think it was important for the folks at the Attorney General's office to know that the rest of the state government was 100% behind them and supportive of them. And we wanted to make sure that they knew from everyone that had worked over there that we love the place and we love their mission and we want to be supportive and there for them in anything they need. And the Attorney Generals come and go. I mean, General Abbott, General Cornyn, General Morales, General Maddox. I mean, you can go back in time. They've all come and gone. And the place is managed to do a great job, irrespective of who the leadership is. And it will continue to do that.
And was there anything in your time there that, aside from trying to maintain a sense of calm or restore a sense of calm, what else were you able to accomplish? What are some of the things that you did while you were there?
Well, so we filed some lawsuits. We wanted to make sure that we kept the message that we were still going to be engaged in litigation that we thought was in the best interest of the citizens of the state of Texas. And so if that meant we needed to file suit against the administration, the Biden administration, then so be it. We would do that. And we did a couple of those cases. And we got those on the way. We looked at some of the processes over there, like crime victims, and started engaging in ways to try and be more efficient, because the purpose of these programs, like with crime victims, is to write a check to people. So let's find out a better, more efficient way to get those checks written to folks in the most expeditious way possible. So those were a lot of the stuff that went on there ad hoc. It was everything dealing with the impeachment, getting subpoenas from the House Investigative Committee, to the normal thing of hearing that a statute is going to be challenged by folks, whether it was Harris County or Houston or San Antonio, and prepping up the trial teams, the Solicitor General's office, and making sure that they were in a position to be able to go defend effectively those kind of cases.
And let me just ask you, the fact that, when you left, and this new interim attorney general is in there, how did you leave it with folks? How did you leave the office?
Oh, I think I left very well. I made some new friends of some folks I'd not had the pleasure of working with in the past. I knew a lot of the people over there. Just a lot of my practice deals with the Attorney General's office. It deals with lawsuits involving the state, or had in the past, or claims against companies. So I've always had a close relationship with most of the folks over there that were in leadership positions and at the staff level. And so I had made sure that everyone knew I was there very short term. And I think the governor did as well in his announcement, that I was a short term interim attorney general. And so I think that's one of the big things that, from my perspective, is I tried to make it clear this is not a long term gig for me. But to make sure that they knew they were getting 100% of me for the 24 hours in each of the days I was lucky enough to serve as attorney general for the state.
So you weren't in the corner office?
No. I had the smallest office I could find on the 8th floor, which had been an intern office, and in fact was the intern office where my oldest son actually did an internship at the AG's office one summer, and was lucky enough to share the same office that he had. It's a little bigger than a closet, but not much.
I wanted to ask you about the fact that the state is leaving ERIC in the next month or so. Talk to me about the importance of ERIC and what it was able to do for the state of Texas, and how concerned should residents be that the state's departure is going to hurt the effort to make sure that there's no fraud going on.
So there's a lot there. Let's unpack it a little bit. And one of the things to focus on is, what are the things that ERIC provided the state of Texas that the state of Texas does not already have access to? And that's really, there's, I think, 26 states and the District of Columbia made up ERIC, were the participants. It's best to think of it almost as a cooperative. Each state paid a little money in for the operational budget, but it was a clearinghouse. And one of the things that it was a clearinghouse of was voter registration and comparing those with the different states. So if there was Jack Fink registered to vote in Dallas, Texas, but Jack Fink was also registered to vote with the same social security number and date of birth in Florida, that would be something that ERIC would notify the states of. And then it would use the information from the Postal Service, from a variety of other sources, information streams, to make sure that those states, both of them, knew that there was somebody who was registered in both states. And most of the time, 99% of the time, that just simply meant that you had moved to Dallas or vice versa. But that was something that ERIC provided as a clearinghouse and was easy, kind of a download. That is really the only thing right now that Texas would not have the ability to do that ERIC was providing. So the death records that would come from the Social Security Administration, those come, remember, from each of the counties in Texas. So that each of the 254 counties have a death clerk in that county. Usually it's the county clerk. They send on a weekly basis a tape up to the state of Texas to give a notification of who has passed away in their counties. So the Secretary of State's office already gets that stream of information that comes into them. That's simple. We've also got something within the state of Texas that confirms when somebody moves from one county to another county to know that they can't be registered in both counties. And so we've got a system in place already for that. So again, the only thing that we're going to lose is probably the efficiency, the convenience of Eric having someone else do a lot of that background work.
And
And the one thing,
isn't that important though?
oh, sure, but it's not going to stop. It's going to continue to go on. That's something that will be done on a real-time basis by the Secretary of State's office. It's just simply not going to be going through Eric. It's going to be done by state officials.
And isn't that much harder though to accomplish for the state?
I think it's a different path. Remember, there's been 8 other states that have pulled out of Eric. And I think that's one of the things that we have to look at as well, as kind of when we talk about the cross state kind of connection. I think that's one of the things that is probably reduced in time. Look, is it efficient? Has it worked? Yes. But it's a policy decision to have joined it. It's a policy decision to pull out. And that was the policy decision of the legislature to pull out.
And
And, you know,
when you were Secretary of State, you were still Secretary of State, if I'm not mistaken, when the law, well, no, you weren't, because this happened after you left.
yes.
The lawmakers passed, but were you ever asked about this before you left, as far as would this be a good idea? And if the state were to leave Eric, what would the state need to do to replace it?
So the state would need to build up an infrastructure to process those information streams and be able to make sure that each of the counties had updated and accurate voter registration list. So that's something that has to be replaced. The counties, the election administrators or the county clerks, whoever is in charge of those voter registrations at the county level, there's an enormous amount of communication that has always gone on. And so one of the downsides, obviously, is you lose the clearinghouse, maybe the efficiency of a cooperative that's doing that process, but you may gain some knowledge and wisdom in the processing of that same information as a state that you don't necessarily get when someone else is doing the work for you. So it's way too early to know whether, in fact, this is going to be long-term net positive or net negative. They've provided funds, they've provided FTEs, is my understanding, the full-time equivalent employees for the Secretary of State's office to fill those positions and to cover the cost associated with managing that information so that it can get back to the counties to ensure that those voter registration rolls remain accurate.
And will this be placed in time, do you think, before the March 1st primary?
I would think so. I mean, so many of these things, remember, it's a 90-day window. So the state of Texas still is a part of Eric. It's my understanding they've been setting up that system throughout the process of the legislative process over at the Secretary of State's office. So I have full confidence they will have something up and running that manages those systems quite well by the time the March primaries come.
And I just had another couple of questions, and I appreciate your time. When you were Secretary of State, you oversaw the 2020 audits, the audits of the 2020 election in the top counties of our state, including 3 here in North Texas, Dallas, Tarrant, and Collin counties. And did you find any widespread fraud or serious problems in our counties at all?
I don't think there was any widespread fraud in anything that we developed. We did it's almost 300, almost 400-page long audit report, and recommend anybody that is interested about elections read it. It's available at the Secretary of State's website. And the governor identified the largest 2 Republican counties, the largest 2 population Democratic counties, and that was the goal, was to go over and see what went on. What we learned were a lot of best practices. And, you saw a place like Collin County that runs its elections exceptionally well. Tarrant County did an exceptional job. Dallas County had some hiccups, but so did Tarrant. And then Harris County, they probably got more like a C or D on their report card, which is not unusual because it's the largest county by far in our state. And the one wild card in elections is people and the human factor in running elections.
And they are subject to the 2022 audit now. How did that happen?
So we had a drawing. We put 30 of the largest 30 populations, which the statute required, and we decided to just have a drawing, just like we do to determine like constitutional the location of a constitutional amendment on that election that you'll see in November. It's a random drawing. So we put those 30 names of the counties in a bucket, and we had somebody come over that was in the office, and we put it on Facebook Live, and it was filmed, and they drew the picture. They drew the counties out, and Harris County and Cameron County were the two large counties selected, and then we selected two of the smaller counties out of the remaining 224 counties.
And I know you're not in office now at the Secretary of State's, but there's been some criticism about the current 2022 audit not being done yet. How do you expect that to be all resolved?
So the enormity of the effort that goes into the audit is really not necessarily fully appreciated. I know that some of the criticism has come from Harris County folks that are connected to they have some election contests that have evolved out of that 22 election. Yeah, my big takeaway is there's nothing that they would find in an audit that they would not be able to get through discovery in the lawsuits that they're involved in. So I don't think it's a fair criticism. I think given the enormity of the effort, I think that, wait till the report comes out before anyone wants to throw rocks at someone like Senator Nelson or Secretary Nelson.
Former Secretary of State and former interim Texas AG, John Scott, thank you so much. We appreciate it.
Jack, thank you. It's always great to be with you.
Likewise. Thank you, sir.